I'm Reb Myron. I'm a minister through Pathways of Light, and I've been a Course in Miracles student for 40 years. I'm going through the lessons this year and asking Jesus to clarify for me, and that's what I'm sharing with you, what I received. So let's get started. We're looking today at lesson 138. Heaven is a decision I must make. 1. In this world, heaven is a choice because here we believe there are alternatives to choose between. We think that all things have an opposite, and what we want, we choose. If heaven exists, there must be a hell as well, for contradiction is a way we make what we perceive and what we think is real. 2. Creation knows no opposite, but here is opposition part of being real. It is this strange perception of the truth that makes the choice of heaven seem to be the same as the relinquishment of hell. It is not really thus. Yet, what is true in God's creation cannot enter here until it is reflected in some form the world can understand. Truth cannot come where it could only be perceived with fear. For this would be the era truth can be brought to illusions. Opposition makes the truth unwelcome, and it cannot come. Only in the world is there the idea of opposites, and here everything has an opposite. But in creation, in heaven, there is no opposite. There's only what is true and what is real. Nothing else exists. However, since we imagine that we are here in the land of opposites, we must choose between what those opposites that we believe. As long as we keep alive the deception of choosing both, we will live in conflict and thus we will suffer. We cannot choose truth because this is a dream, but we can choose to dream of something close to truth. 3. Choice is the obvious escape from what appears as opposites. Decision lets one of conflicting goals become the aim of effort and expenditure of time. Without decision, time is but a waste and effort dissipated. It is spent for nothing in return, and time goes by without results. There is no sense of gain, for nothing is accomplished and nothing learned. You need to be reminded that you think 1,000 choices are confronting you when there is really only one to make. And even this but seems to be a choice. Do not confuse yourself with all the doubts and myriad decisions would induce. You make but one. And when that one is made, you will perceive it was no choice at all. For truth is true and nothing else is true. There is no opposite to choose instead. There is no contradiction to the truth. The reason the world continues to play out in our minds like the longest running bad play ever is that we think there are thousands of choices to decide between. Will I choose to make money, my God, or will I choose to walk a spiritual path instead? Will I try to fix my child's life, or at least tell him the best way to live it? Or will I let him live it to the best of his ability and support him as he does so? Will I go to the show with my friends or stay home? Will I take this medicine or try a herbal solution? Will I eat ice cream for dessert or stay on my diet? It's endless. No wonder we're still lost in our stories. Or maybe not. Maybe it is simple. What if I only had one choice to make, no matter what seemed to be happening? Wouldn't that simplify everything? Wouldn't that help me to awaken more quickly? What if, in every case, I realized that the only choice I was making was which mind to use to make the decision? Do I look at any particular question with a split mind? Or do I turn to the Holy Spirit to guide my choice? In choosing to make decisions with the split mind, the wrong mind, I'm choosing to stay in the world of my dreams, even if it's bringing me nightmares. If I choose instead to use my right mind where the Holy Spirit abides, I will awaken from the dreams. 5. Choosing depends on learning, and the truth cannot be learned, but only recognized. In recognition, its acceptance lies, and as it is accepted, it is known. But knowledge is beyond the goals we seek to teach within the framework of this course. Ours are teaching goals to be attained through learning how to reach them, what they are, and what they offer you. Decisions are the outcome of your learning, for they rest on what you have accepted as the truth of what you are and what your needs must be. 6. In this insanely complicated world, heaven appears to take the form of choice rather than merely being what it is. Of all the choices you have tried to make, this is the simplest, most definitive, and prototype of all the rest, the one which settles all decisions. If you could decide the rest, this one remains unsolved. But if you solve this one, the rest are resolved with it. For all decisions but conceal this one by taking different forms. Here is the final and the only choice, which is truth accepted or denied. Jesus tells us that choosing depends on learning. He also points out that the truth can't be learned, but only accepted. So what are we trying to learn? Within the world, we have choices to make, and we're learning how to do this. We need to know what we are choosing now and how it affects us. Once we understand the consequences of our present choice, we need to know how to choose differently. Through doing these lessons and learning to turn to the Holy Spirit as my guide and my interpreter of the world, I have begun to make better decisions. My son had a difficult decision to make, and the correct decision seemed obvious to me. I wanted to talk to him about it to be sure he would make the better decision. I felt like I really had to call him. The feeling was that this had to be done now, right now, before it was too late. I've come to recognize that sense of urgency is to be distrusted. The ego is always pushing to do. So I didn't do anything. Instead, I went within and I asked for guidance. I felt immediate peace, but still I did nothing. A little later, while my mind was relaxed, I saw a clear thought. It was, trust your brother. I knew this was from Spirit, and I understood why this was best. If I jump into my son's life, instructing him how to live it, I may as well tell him I don't have faith in him. How painful it would be for him to think I had lost faith in him. Maybe he will make a mistake in his choice, and that's okay. This is how we learn that it's better to go within for our answers. He can't learn that if someone else is doing it for him. The world we made is insanely complicated, but the solution is simple. 7. So we begin today considering the choice that time was made to help us make. Such is our holy purpose, now transformed from the intent you gave it, that is, to be a means for demonstrating hell is real. Hope changes to despair, and life itself must, in the end, be overcome by death. In death alone, our opposites resolve, for ending opposition is to die. And thus salvation must be seen as death, for life is seen as conflict. To resolve the conflict is to end your life as well. 8. These mad beliefs can gain unconscious hold of great intensity and grip the mind with terror and anxiety so strong that it will not relinquish its ideas about its own protection. It must be saved from salvation, threatened to be safe and magically armored against truth. And these decisions are made unaware to keep him safely undisturbed, apart from question and from reason and from doubt. For much of my life, I suffered from anxiety and depression. Up until I had children, I always considered suicide as my salvation. If things got too bad, I had a way out. Even after I had children, the thought of death seemed like salvation, only now it was denied to me. If I think that death is how I'm saved from my misery, then life seems like a threat. God is life eternal, and so the threat seems to be God and seems to be an eternal threat. I didn't think all of this out at the time, but in retrospect, I see my thought process clearly. A Course in Miracles showed me how to find salvation in God. 9. Heaven is chosen consciously. The choice cannot be made until alternatives are accurately seen and understood. All that is veiled in shadows must be raised to understanding, to be judged again, this time with heaven's help. And all mistakes in judgment that the mind had made before are open to correction, as the truth dismisses them as causeless. Now are they without effects. They cannot be concealed because their nothingness is recognized. 10. The conscious choice of heaven is as sure as is the ending of the fear of hell when it raised from its protective shield of unawareness and brought to light. Who can decide between the clearly seen and the unrecognized? Yet who can fail to make a choice between alternatives when only one is seen as valuable, the other as a wholly worthless thing, a but imagined source of guilt and pain? Who hesitates to make a choice like this? And shall we hesitate to choose today? It took many years for me to choose against all the guilt in my mind and the debilitating fear that gripped me. But I did just as Jesus describes here. I had to look at it, and I had to question my beliefs rather than assuming I was right. I did this with heaven's help because the ego is not interested in my release. Its only goal is to keep the world going. As I looked with the Holy Spirit at each circumstance, each torturous thought in my mind, I began to see that they were just mistakes, not sins. I began to see my way out. If this whole thing is just mistaken thoughts projected to look like reality, I must be safe. If they're not the truth, they cannot have real effects, no matter how it seems they do. I look back on this, and it's unbelievable that I never saw that I was hiding these choices from myself. It seemed like the world was just happening to me. And from that perspective, I could only feel guilty and fear God. Seeing clearly, it all seems ridiculous, but the absurdity of it was not clear at first. When I realized that ego thinking is like a haze that obscures sight, I was willing to let that go and see clearly at last. 11. We make the choice for heaven as we wake and spend 5 minutes making sure that we had made the one decision that is sane. We recognize we make a conscious choice between what has existence and what has nothing but an appearance of truth. Its pseudo being brought to what is real is flimsy and transparent in the light. It holds no terror now, for what was made enormous, vengeful, pitiless with hate, demands obscurity for fear to be invested there. Now it is recognized, but a foolish, trivial mistake. 12. Before we close our eyes and sleep tonight, we reaffirm the choice that we have made each hour in between. And now we give the last 5 minutes of our waking day to the decision with which we awoke. As every hour passed, we have declared our choice again in a brief, quiet time devoted to maintaining sanity. And finally, we close the day with this, acknowledging we chose but what we want. Heaven is a decision I must make. I make it now and will not change my mind because it is the only thing I want. Before I found my way out of the most confusing of the beliefs, everything seemed so real and so important that I felt damned for each mistake. I can hardly remember what that was like, just that it happened. But now, though my mind still stumbles on some untrue thoughts, I am not afraid of it. I know it is just thoughts, and that thoughts change when I change my mind. I happily do whatever needs to be done, knowing that I'm being led out of hell and into heaven just by doing this work. Thank you so much for sharing this lesson with me. Thank you for watching my video. And if you found it helpful, please like it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. And I'll be back tomorrow with another lesson.